the Building Permit Allocation Program in Mount Pleasant, because I'm getting a lot of folks that are now contacting us. We are selling on my team more land over the past 12 months than we have sold in probably the past 6 years. And David, I was showing you some stats before the show about just what's happening in the vacant land side of our market and how confusing to a lot of people it can be. And so let's just kind of start a little simple. What's the goal of the Building Permit Allocation Program in Mount Pleasant?
Sure. The goal behind the program is to slow the rate of growth. They're putting a limit on permits every year, and that's going to be in place. It's in place now. It's going to be in place for 5 years. And add it all up, and it's 420 single-family homes a year. That's what they're going to allow. And then there's some more permits for multifamily.
Okay. And so let's say best case scenario. Let's say this works out. How do you think that impacts our market?
Sure. Well, it obviously restricts how quickly people can build. And it's the pace that's really kind of chafed some people in Mount Pleasant, because remember, Mount Pleasant had 30,000 residents in 1990. Now they have about 90,000. It's been very rapid, and they're not all going to the same place. The town's also expanded its size, but the town's focus is this is just coming too fast constantly. We want to slow it down, and here's how we're going to do it.
Right. And so let's say that we plug this hole, right? That water's going to redirect somewhere. So what do you perceive to be some of the challenges that arise out of limiting the number of single-family homes that can be built on an annual basis?
Right. Well, I mean, certainly classic economics tells us, you restrict the supply, then it's going to raise prices. That's great for people who already own property in Mount Pleasant. It's not good for people who want to build there. And the big question is going to be, does the desire to build more houses in Mount Pleasant exceed the amount of permits they're going to allow? Because, in the background, the economy plays a big role, and we could be slowing down, and maybe they won't even get requests for as many permits as they'll allow. That's what happened the last time they did this.
Right. And it's, whenever we have one of these building permit allocation programs, it's kind of a telling sign of the market, isn't it?
It sure was the last time. Mount Pleasant passed their first permit allocation plan at the end of 2000. The recession arrived 3 months later.
Right. I will say, and I don't mind being on air and saying this, that I don't think we're headed toward a recession or a market in which the bubble is about to burst. I do think that people are very confused. First of all, I will say that I think the industry overall is confused about the state of the real estate market, which means that the public is even more confused about the state of the real estate market. Because I'll have people call and they'll say, hey, Brian, how does the Building Permit Allocation Program, as an example, affect the value of my real estate, of my vacant lot? And the truth of the matter is, quite frankly, it doesn't really impact the value of your lot. When buyers are now approaching the process of buying land and building on it, one thing you can do as a seller to differentiate yourself is have all of your ducks in a row. The due diligence period associated with purchasing these properties can be quite lengthy, depending upon everything that needs to be done to determine whether or not you can build what you want to build on that particular lot. So if you have your survey, if you have, even a copy of the ARB guidelines for building a property in that subdivision, it's at least a start. But the more that you can do and the more you can provide and the more you can facilitate a transaction on the behalf of a seller for a buyer, the better positioned you're going to be that person that buyer wants to work with. Because when we're talking about lots in general, unless we're talking about waterfront property or marshfront or a specific, way in which that property is situated in that neighborhood or area, there's not a huge difference between one, what we call an inside lot, just, a regular lot sandwiched between two homes, and the next one down the street. So if you can differentiate yourself and be easier to work with, shorten that time frame for that buyer, the better chance you're going to have of being the person that buyer chooses to go through that lengthy process with you. And I think the other thing, David, that a lot of people aren't really talking about are just the impact fees of Mount Pleasant versus other areas of Charleston. I'm not really asking for specifics here, but do you find that gets kind of swept under the rug?
People have stopped talking about it so much because it was approved 2 years ago and fully phased in June. But the town of Mount Pleasant now has, certainly the highest impact fees on the South Carolina coast, some of the highest in the state. I think they're maybe comparable up near Fort Mill, where they're dealing with all the growth from Charlotte. But I mean, North Charleston has no impact fees. City of Charleston, virtually none. Mount Pleasant, thousands of dollars if you're building a home, or and on the commercial side, if you do something in Mount Pleasant that generates a lot of traffic, there are going to be a lot of fees, even if it's an existing building you're moving into.